Welcome. Settle into a comfortable position. Let your body grow heavy and still, and let your mind begin to drift far away from the noise of the present. Tonight, we're traveling to a distant world, one ruled not by clocks or computers, but by tides, winds, and the cold rhythm of seasons. A world where people rose with the pale light of the northern sky and rested beneath thick firs while the fire cracked low. Imagine yourself in a Viking settlement, not as a warrior, not as a myth, but as a real person, living a real life, surrounded by wood, wool, smoke, and snow. We'll walk through their days, see what they saw, feel the rough rhythm of their routines, and listen to the slow heartbeat of a community on the edge of the world. Then, we'll follow the life of a figure who shaped their age. We'll explore the riddles their culture left behind. And finally, we'll visit the lives of those who lived at the top, the chieftains, and the ones whose furs were so close your eyes, or keep them open gently, if you prefer. You don't need to remember everything. This isn't a test. It's a soft unraveling of the past. Let's begin. Segment 1. Why it sucked to be a Viking farmer. Imagine you're waking up. It's late autumn. In the far north, perhaps in what is now coastal Norway. There's no alarm clock, no morning news, just a scratch of wool blankets, and the low hum of wind pressing against the turf roof of your longhouse. The air inside is cool, tinged with wood smoke and the faint musk of animals. You rise, slowly. There's a dull ache in your shoulders. Yesterday's work never quite leaves. You share this longhouse with several others. Perhaps your family, perhaps your neighbors. Privacy is not a concept you're familiar with. Space is communal. Warmth is communal. Even breath feels communal. Outside, dawn is a gray smudge, barely distinguishable from the night. The land is quiet, but not still. There's always movement. Chickens, goats, the muffled bleating of sheep. You pull on a wool tunic, rough against the skin, and step out onto the packed earth. The wind bites your face. It always does. There's no time to pause. You begin the morning's chores, tending to animals, chopping firewood, checking the smoked fish, hanging in the shed. Your hands are already red with coal. The axe is heavier than you remembered. Your life, like those around you, is lived in cycles. Seasons define you more than kings. Spring is for sowing, summer for fishing and repairs, autumn for harvesting and slaughter, winter is for survival. Today, your focus is firewood and fences. You carry logs from the forest's edge, sweat rising under your layers despite the chill. You patch holes where goats might squeeze through. You work until your fingers numb. Food is simple: porridge, dried fish, flat. Every bite is earned. The meals are shared, eaten quickly, sometimes in silence, sometimes with stories passed down in low voices. Cleanliness is important, surprisingly so. Once a week perhaps, on what they call lagadagur, washing day, you bathe in the icy stream or a wooden tub. If lucky, hair is combed with carved bone tools, fingernails cleaned with knives. But not everything is work. There are moments of pause, of stillness. In the evenings, someone might recite part of a saga, long story of gods, monsters, and heroes, spoken aloud beside the fire. The flames flicker, eyes grow heavy, but beneath it, all always there, is worry. A failed harvest, a sickness that moves quickly, a neighbor who grows desperate, a raid, not by Vikings but on Vikings, because even the raiders are often raided. And yet, you endure. The land gives little, but it gives a community watches out for its own. Children laugh. Elders nod in the corner, wrapped in fur, remembering days that were harder still. You sleep that night on a bed of straw and cloth. The fire dies slowly. Outside, the wind whistles through the pines, and you dream not of glory or war, but simply of warmth and the quiet hope that spring will come soon. As the snow settles gently across your village, the world outside your narrow fjord feels distant, almost mythical. But not to everyone. Some Viking lives stretch far beyond their icy beginnings. One such life belongs to Leif Erikson, a man who saw beyond the horizon, and in doing so, reached a land unknown to his ancestors. Let us step softly now into the world of Leif, son of Eric the Red. Born in Iceland, likely around the year 970, Leif came from bold blood. His father, Eric, had been banished from Norway for murder, and then from Iceland, again, for bloodshed. It was Eric who founded the first Norse settlement in Greenland, a place as harsh and as lonely as it sounds. Leif's early years would have been shaped by cold air, shifting seas, and his father's fierce will. Imagine a boy growing up not in a palace or school, but in a timber hall built against glaciers, hearing tales of monsters and new worlds told by sailors with salt in their beards. By his early 20s, Leif had already earned respect as a seafarer. He traveled to Norway and entered the court of King Olaf Tryggvason, who introduced him to Christianity. It was a new idea in the North, a religion with one god instead of many, a softer moral code, clashing with the hard world of raiders and revenge. Leif listened, he converted, and when he sailed back toward Greenland, he carried more than cargo. He carried missionaries and the first whispers of change. But his greatest journey was still ahead. One day, Leif heard a tale, a sailor's tale, as they often were, of land sighted far to the west, rich with trees, grapevines, and wild grain. Some dismissed it as drunken fantasy, others as exaggeration. But Leif listened closely, and then, as quietly as winter falling on a field, he decided to go. He gathered a crew of about 35 men. They loaded a longship, and they set out not knowing what they would find, or if they would return. Imagine the cold, salt wind on your face, the sea, endless days without sight of land, the groan of the ship's timbers, the creak of oars, the silence of stars above. After many days, they reached land. It was not the coastlines they knew. Leif and his men found themselves in a strange, lush territory, wooded and milder than Greenland. They explored slowly, cautiously. They named places: Helluland, the land of flat stones; Markland, the forest land; and finally, Vinland. The name Vinland suggests vines, perhaps wild grapes, or something else. What matters is how the place felt. Different, possibility-laden, soft-edged compared to the brutal cold. They knew. They built a small settlement, likely in what is now Newfoundland, Canada. They stayed a winter, hunted, gathered, observed. Then they left. It might have been conflict with the indigenous peoples, or homesickness, or simple practicality. The distance was too great, whatever the reason. Leif returned to Greenland. He never led another voyage there, but he told the tale. Others tried, some failed, some vanished, and so Leif became not just a man, but a quiet legend. In later sagas, he is remembered not for conquest, but for discovery, not for war, but for curiosity. His name, Leif, the lucky, echoes softly through the centuries. He died around the year 1020. No drama, no war cry, just an old sailor in a colder world, a man who saw beyond the edge of his known sea. Now, we remember him, not because he changed history dramatically, but because he showed what was possible. He reminded us that even the most hardened lives can dream, and sometimes even drift beyond the ice toward something gentler. In the quiet corners of the Viking world, along winding forest paths, beside old burial mounds, or standing alone in windswept fields, you might come across a tall, weathered stone. Its surface, once sharply carved, is now soft by centuries of wind and rain. The shapes are unfamiliar, angular, runic. They seem both purposeful and mysterious. A message, perhaps, but one locked in silence. These are and their presence is both ordinary and extraordinary. Imagine yourself walking through a pine-scented glade. The sun filters weakly through the trees. You hear only birds and the rustle of leaves. and they're half covered in moss as one of these ancient monuments. To us, they seem like puzzles, but to the Vikings, they were messages, memorials, markers, quiet anchors of memory. Runes were not just letters, they were symbols shaped by belief. Each one held meaning beyond its sound. Rado, 4 journeys. Iwas, 4 horses. The act of carving runes was sacred. It took time, care, and often the stones were not meant to be read quickly or by many. They were for specific eyes, perhaps for the gods, perhaps for the dead, perhaps for time itself. Some runestones are simple. They might read, "Here stands the stone of Bjorn, who sailed west and did not return." Others are more elaborate, spiraling with decorative dragons and intricate patterns. They speak of battles, of generosity, of lineage. Some are poetic, others surprisingly mundane. And then there are those that say almost nothing at all. Just a name, a symbol, a strange phrase. One reads simply, "Thor wrote this." Was it vandalism, a joke, a spell? We can only guess. There is something deeply calming in that not knowing. Archaeologists have studied runestones for decades. They've cataloged their styles, their stone types, their locations. They've translated the more obvious messages. But still, some remain unknown. A single rune out of place. A phrase that resists, meaning a carving that appears where no stone should be. It is not just the stones themselves that are mysterious, but the way they were used. Were they grave markers? Or warnings? Were they signs for travelers? Or coded records passed from generation to generation? Some scholars believe certain stones align with celestial events like solstices or lunar cycles. Others suspect they were used in rituals, now lost to time. And there are whisperings in older texts that some runes were used to bind spells, to protect, to harm, to hide. Whether that's true, we may never know. But what's most beautiful is this: these stones were never meant to last forever. Yet they have. Frost and fire. Through centuries of silence, they stand still, quiet, waiting, like gentle reminders that even the simplest life leaves a trace. And now, as your mind wanders, picture one of these runestones in your own world, tucked under a tree, etched faintly on an old wall, a forgotten message in a forgotten tongue. Not loud, not flashy, just there, soft as sleep.